Excellent. So the recording is running. It was paused, so it didn't make its little announcement. But thank you all so much for coming back for meeting 2 and for Lisa for joining us for meeting 1. Ted, do you mind jumping to the next slide?
Sure.
Just for everyone else's sake, Ted Fields is another member of the Economic Development team. He's going to be joining us this evening, helping with the technical aspects. So this is our agenda for this evening. But before we get to any of the things on this list, I did want to just give a minute to Lisa to introduce herself if you'd like. No pressure either.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, my dog was just barking, so I moved. Okay. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I tried to mute it because of my dog. So I'm Lisa Natali. Nice to meet you all. And I'm the owner of Some Yoga Studio in Somerville, but I also grew up in the home where my studio is, right on Medford Street and School near the corner there. And the city has been very good with all the programs and helping me along the way and through COVID. So I appreciate everything the city has done. But so basically, yeah, I've grew up in the house. I now own the house, and I also am a small business owner in Gilman Sq. So I'm very excited to be part of this and very plugged in because it's really exciting what's going on in our little Gilman Sq area.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate you giving us an intro since we didn't get a chance to do so last time.
Thank you.
So I want to just start with checking in with everyone on the summary from last meeting and just see if everyone had a chance to take a look at it and if there's any comments or thoughts that you'd like us to edit in that before we make it the official record. All right. I think I had correctly that only Lisa was absent. So I think that's all set. Anyone? Thoughts? Shake your head if we're all good.
I looked it over and it looked okay. Looks like it's complete.
Okay, thank you, Diana. I appreciate that. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So we will post that to the website along with the recording of the meeting. That way, if folks want to refer to it later, ourselves or members of the public, that will be an option. The next thing on our list that we have is to open it up for public comment, if there is any. We would do this for the first 10 minutes. I am checking over the list of attendees, and I do not see any members of the public. So seeing none, that allows us to jump right to the meat of today's conversation. So Ted, if you don't mind jumping back one slide.
Sure.
Thank you. So as we go through this, we're going to talk through a few different questions. And what we really were hoping for tonight is to really dive into what you all heard at the 14th. We'll give you some of the things that we saw out of that as well. And then talk about how we can engage with the community more and really turn this in, from a one-night event into a series of activities for these first few weeks. So in doing that, I'm going to be taking notes on each of these questions, and I'll take them live. So you should see comments popping up on your screen as we go through this. And I just want to run through one technical piece about GoToWebinar that might be helpful. And that is that you have, with GoToWebinar, if you have the ability to zoom in and out on the screen itself. For this to work, we have to stay in this format where we're in the work side of PowerPoint as opposed to the presentation side of PowerPoint. But if this text is too small for you, there is an option to zoom in and out. So if you're on a trackpad, you can use 2 fingers to zoom in and out. If you have a wheel on your mouse, you can wheel in and out. And then if you are in the if you're just looking at the screen and it's not maximized, there's a top gray toolbar that has zoom in it, and that allows you to zoom in and out as well. Any questions on the function before we move in? Okay, seeing none. Ted, if you don't mind moving to slide 5.
Sure.
I was thinking, why don't we just dive right in and talk about how the meeting went and sort of what you heard in the groups that you were attending and reflections and thoughts. Is there anyone who wants to take a first crack?
I can go.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I heard a lot of discussion of affordable housing. I think that was high on people's agenda in my group, and there was also there's a little bit of discussion on how to use it for community buildings, uses that the whole community could enjoy. So those are the two things I heard. As far as I think in my group there was a discussion on whether we should take. There was some discussion about the mobile gas station and whether or not the owner wanted to sell it or not, and that the owner might want to keep it. So that was one thing that came up. I don't think we discussed much about the height of the proposed building. That didn't really come up in discussion in my group. So. And I think that's one thing that we might want to discuss.
Hey, Rachel, I don't know how the mechanics of these kind of things work in the sense that is the city obligated to provide so much low housing? Because I'm wondering over in Union Square, what would be the number there? I mean, I see a huge building going up. Is some of that designated? I imagine it would be, but what's the formula? Is there one in place for stuff like this?
There is. With the Union Square piece, I'm forgetting because the Union Square tower that was in the old zoning code.
No, it's 20%.
It's 20%. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah. Union Square is 20%.
Yeah, so 20% is the standard at this point for any new project. That 20%, at least 20% affordable housing.
Mm-hmm. And that's a whole formula unto itself, right? Like who qualifies and whatever. And are they? Is that a scale thing that'll change? Like in other words, it's a deal that the builder makes with the city and has sort of some kind of give and take thing, or is there actually an etched in stone? You better do it this way.
The 20% is etched in stone. Above 20%, there's flexibility.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, and the one thing that I want to bring up again, because I'm you know, I think it's pretty clear. I'm not crazy about taking the mobile station, but I also want to make it clear that, you know, I talk to people, you know, I'm in the building right there, and I talk to random people all the time. They come into my business and whatever. And the locals that I've talked to, they don't have a clue. They think, you know, they would just love, you know, to take big business away, mobile, big bad corporation. I think really I want to start a situation where, you know, it's definitely known that mobile is just leasing. The owner of that property are Somerville people through and through. They've been here for a billion years. They own it, and you know, and I know one of the things early on in Rachel, you said the city takes it very seriously. But I do look around and see a lot of eminent domain going on. So, I mean, not a lot, but I mean, enough to say, well, you know, they're flexing their muscle. If they want it, they're going to get it. And again, I reiterate, the city wants it, but they don't need it. And that's the thing that sort of gets to me, because it's like, you know, you know, that to me, it's a nice big piece of property the old Holman's building, and why they would have to, you know, enlarge it to do a grander thing. I get the whole sort of, yeah, the good of all, but and again, you know, if anybody give us an old Melville station leased to lease, but owned the land, we wouldn't be too happy about it. And I just know that. And so anyway, that's something I think I'd like to see more of the people realize it's a family that owns it, not mobile. They just lease it, and that's probably going to end soon because, you know, the city doesn't want gas stations anymore. They, you know, they're not going to, they don't want to renew good gas next to me. So there's a new game order in that, in the world of gasoline and cars, I guess. So, but anyway, that's my 2 cents there.
I
Well,
I had
James.
a question. Oh,
No,
sorry.
go ahead, Melinda.
Okay. Well, I was just curious. I thought that at the end of the public meeting, it was said that the people who owned the mobile property wanted to sell it. And so my question was, what's the difference between, like, why doesn't the city just buy it outright from them versus eminent domain? Is it a fiscal difference? Like, if they take it for eminent domain, you don't have to give them as much as it would be worth, or what's
And then
in there?
sorry to jump on that, but my question was going to be right along those lines, but from the other side of, okay, so I thought that the property owners owned/ran the mobile station, but if it's just being leased to mobile, then would the property owner be open to working with a developer to develop that parcel as part of this, rather than, because basically you're right. I am also one of those who thinks we could move gas stations away from close-knit neighborhoods like this and stop, you know, and keep them like the 2 gas stations over on McGrath or other major roads like that, and have the smaller neighborhood areas be for more pedestrian, walkable, focused things. But again, that was from me thinking that the property owner equaled the mobile owner. But if that's simply not true, then that's another direction to take with that. And maybe they're open to working with a developer to put something in there that would work in concert with the rest of the development. Yeah, it's my.
Well, I think he would like to develop it, but you know, it's very difficult to get any developer want to get involved when they know there's this eminent domain thing looming, obviously. So no developer's even done anything. I'm not intimate with that property. I happen to know the guy, but I don't know if he's, you know, what he's been doing peripherally trying to. But well, I do know he would like to sell it, but he's not going to sell it. You know, the city's not going to give him what a developer would, because the developer is going to go in and they're going to make a real sweet deal with him, because they're going to want that piece of property, and they'll go considerably higher than the city. But having said all that, Rachel, have you been in touch with Tony or his family, and do you know any inside as to what their real gut feeling is?
So Tom has been most recently in touch with Tony. Tony is the owner of the property. They are sort of waiting to hear how this works. If the city, to answer sort of Melinda and Jennifer's questions and James yours all at the same time, the way the city purchases property is, in this case, is likely to be through an urban renewal plan. That doesn't necessarily, what eminent domain means is that there's a guided process through which we are compensating. It's highly regulated how that compensation happens. And that compensation is both to the property owner and then to the property tenants. So both the owners of the convenience store who operate the mobile station, and then, you know, the convenience store and the mobile station together, and then the owners, Tony and family, would be compensated if the city were to take the property. Taking the property means that the city is purchasing. Is not something. It's just a matter of. I do need to do more research, and I'm writing this down actually as we speak. I sort of bringing in our legal team to really dig into what would happen in a. Is there a situation where we could do a purchase without having to take the steps of the urban renewal and the eminent domain? Like if there's a joint venture, what are our options?
Yeah. Well,
Can I add something to that, Rachel? This is Ben.
Of course.
So first of all, I want to say I think that everyone so far is right, that this is a kind of key issue, right? When we're thinking about these parcels, or are we talking just about one parcel, or are we talking about potentially bigger? So I think it's right that it's going to definitely guide our decisions. I guess two things that I think are relevant. I think part of, in my opinion, what would be really valuable is for this group to think about, rather than kind of like whether or not and how we would want to take that property, what we want to see on these in this area. And once we think we have some plans, then I think we can realistically ask, is there a way to, include a private developer just operating on open market principles and accomplishing the goals we want to see here? Or is really the only way that we could possibly accomplish this would be for the city to acquire that property? And I'll just add, I am not a lawyer here, but on some other issues where the city has been working kind of collaboratively with property owners, my understanding is that our hands are quite tied legally in terms of how the city can acquire property, and the idea of the city just kind of buying something at market rate is really not on the table legally. And you can kind of imagine corruption reasons why that is the case, that you wouldn't want a city, a mayor that could just go buy some market rate property from whoever he wanted, right? It's very regulated. And that said, I think that, Rachel, I agree with you. There are potentially paths forward, but it's much less straightforward than you might imagine outside of government.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what's going on with other eminent domains, like the Ball Square, the bowling alley place, and then obviously there's a lot of scuttlebutt about Union Square and Ricky's Market and all like that. And the ones that have taken place, I've heard, but of course I'm not going to be able to swear that they were never happy with the city offered them, and they had to take it because that's the way it is. And then they go into the lawsuit. That's sort of the routine of eminent domain. They take it, and then you have to sue them and hopefully get more money. And again, that's why I think the Montagnettis, I think their situation is, they do better off financially if they found a developer that wanted to deal with that piece of property, and they would be in cahoots with them in a sense. Well, it gets done, and then they say, see you later. That's a thing that I think would work for them. I know that, it's going to cost legally a lot of money, and then that's why they also throw up their hands, but.
So thanks.
Hi,
Ben
Elgard, I just want to jump in as well, because I kind of want to circle back to the fact that in our conversation in my group, we did really talk about like an integrated approach to the area. So I know that some people are talking about how things could happen independently on different parts, but unlike other places like on Broadway where eminent domain was discussed, I think what I heard in my group was that people were wondering how it can feel like this environment that we didn't really have, which is this a lively area that had different kinds of types of spaces where people come together in different ways below housing. So everything on like the first couple floors, or even subterranean maybe, would be things that we could take advantage of in our own neighborhood, or people who are coming and going using the T could access. And I think one of the hard things was that no one quite knew what ratio of all these wonderful things really fit the space. And it was really hard to articulate how everything could come together. But I did see a lot of overlap with previous conversations around having places to hang in more formal settings to gather, and different kinds of organizations, whether it's something like the YMCA or another nonprofit, or recreational, or something like businesses where people are paying to visit. And so I think there's a lot of that kind of mix that we saw. And I just want to highlight that, because one of the things that is really hard is I didn't hear, we didn't really get to that place where people knew exactly what went where, but just kind of that overall feeling in that corner of our neighborhood.
I do want to jump to Jamie, because I know she's been trying to say something.
Yeah, I just always choose the worst times when someone else is talking. But yes, I was just going to give my blurb on what folks in my session seemed to bring up. A lot of stuff, but the couple of things that I kept thinking about afterward were thinking about ways of, even if a decision isn't made about something right now, leaving that opportunity for later. So, even if there's not going to be entrance to the T made now to the station on the downhill side, developing in a way that that's an option later, maybe, instead of removing that potential or making it really difficult later. So yeah, so just that kind of staged approach. And a lot of people had a lot of the same ideas, which I thought was meaningful. And then someone mentioned something that I hadn't heard yet before, but just making sure that there were public facilities or bathrooms available. And that to me was just like, oh yeah, like, why aren't we thinking about that? And everyone pretty much got on board with that. So I just kept thinking about that later as well. And we all kind of really liked the format, just the tool we were using for like brainstorming is actually kind of effective. I've been in a lot of meetings where it's whatever we're trying to do to kind of crowdsource in this Zoom setting doesn't really work, but I liked that tool.
Great.
That's super helpful to hear. Diana, I think was.
Yeah, I will echo a lot of what Jamie and others have just said. And one thing I heard in my breakout group a lot was, again, the idea of having public space where everybody can come together and kind of people watch and see each other. And a lot of people were talking about a winter garden, some kind of big, airy indoor space, so that when it's so cold and horrible here half the year, we can still kind of feel like we're in a public space and maybe have events and gatherings without freezing to death. And that a space like that could also be convertible and work well in the summertime, and maybe be a cool shady space in the summertime. And the other thing was the idea of using the space to tie together all the connections from the different sides of the site, kind of as Jamie said too, like since the T design got simplified and they took away that entrance from inside our parcel, make sure that there's a way to get to the T down from Medford and across our site, and then also from Richdale across the site there. And a lot of people were saying, oh, I can't walk up the hill. I want to be able to go directly into the site without having to go up and around over on like Medford or Walnut or something like that. So it seems really important to have a connection from the Medford side, and it seems kind of crazy to not build that into the plan. And then my idea that I thought of during the meeting was maybe there could be an escalator, in addition to having elevators, and some escalator inside the building, a building that goes from Medford Street up to the grade of the train tracks. And it would be like, if you imagine like a kind of office building or a mall, not that we would have that kind of building, but that has like a huge airy atrium, and there's an escalator going up one side of it, and you can look down into the public space and see everybody. If that's part of a dense enough building that can help pay for the cost of maintaining and building and maintaining that escalator, I think that might be one way to get people up from the grade of Medford up to the train tracks, and also help activate the public space by having people constantly passing through it. And I was also surprised in the meeting that nobody was saying like we shouldn't have any development. Like, I'm an urban planner, and I've gone to so many meetings where people don't want to see anything. And I was pleasantly surprised that everyone here was like, yeah, let's do something. Let's have lots of housing, and let's, have all these public uses like the YMCA and other things. So I thought that was really exciting that people were so supportive of doing something here.
I think, Jennifer, you've got your hand up.
Yep. I was in, I think, Diana, you and I were in the same session. So yeah, I heard all that as well. And what I saw, and I actually went back through and read all the jam boards, people really did converge to multiple people's points on mixed use. Like there was no session where the subgroup came up with, no, it should only be this one kind of thing. It should only be like this. Everybody was very firmly in the idea that whatever ends up being in there should be this mix of community space, commercial space, retail space, housing space, residential space, and that it should be as diverse as possible without overwhelming. I mean, we're not talking about a huge plot of land here, so be as diverse as possible without overwhelming it. And I think to Jamie's point, and kind of back to Ben's point, that in particular, considering the third parcel, I think a staged, my only thought that I just had now as opposed to during the meeting was that we're talking about a space that is currently a gas station. It's going to need remediation. It's going to need all sorts of additional treatment that will get it off of the same timeline for development as the rest of it, because I live up the hill from the former gas station at the corner of School and Summer, and I'm waiting to see how that's going to play out, because same thing, it was a former gas station that wasn't being used as much for its gas station-ness, and I'm waiting to see what they're putting in there, but they obviously have to wait until whatever remediation needs to happen. So uncoupling that parcel, the kind of uncoupling it as far as timeline, I think is a good exercise. That whatever happens there, it's not going to happen at the same time as the rest of it. Otherwise, it'll take years for all of it to happen. That was just the one thought I had during today's meeting, as opposed to back then.
Melinda, and then I see Ben's hand as well. So why don't we go Melinda first and then to Ben Elgart.
So I just wanted to say that one of the things that came up in our group that seemed to have the most, plus ones, minus ones, was, and I don't know that it's in the realm of what we are supposed to be talking about, but whether or not Medford Street stays open to car traffic. I know it's opening now, but I know there's a lot of people who want it to become like a walkway or garden space or something. So and then there's a lot of people who worry about the increased traffic that causes on Pearl Street and Walnut. So I just think that we have to be thinking about that in our planning. Obviously, I think whether or not it's cars driving through, it will play into our greater vision of what the three sites we're talking about will look like and how they will function. But I don't know. We just have to keep it in mind that might be a big contentious issue.
Hey, it's Ben again. The two things I wanted to add, one was I didn't hear any ideas that were specific to the triangle. So I know the triangle is a hard space. It currently is not flat, and it might, and so in terms of open space, people like the idea of retaining open space, but no one had any ideas that they were surfacing that were specific to that. In terms of that open space, we needed a hill to do. So I know I previously suggested how sledding hills and in the neighborhood were how I bonded with people during winter. And Rachel, I know you floated it, but I didn't really hear that really coming up specific to like, we need a sled on that space, because I've tried, it's very difficult. So I did want to bring that up. And the other specific thing that kind of also kind of came up in the mix was at the end of the meeting, I think we did hear also some voices around the one thing that was kind of brought up as being a city initiative that wasn't really from the neighborhood, and that was I don't know what you call it, the water retainment thing. And I think that there was, I know that was brought up as being something to consider, and there were some very strident voices about how that might not serve the neighborhood so much as serve the city interests. And we wanted to figure out what would really celebrate the neighborhood and coming together, and how even bringing that in could jeopardize some of the initiatives that we really wanted to bring to Gilman Square. Thank you, stormwater tank. That's what you call it.
If I can pause, I want to hear from Brittany and Jack and Michelle and others, but I want to maybe, this might be a good moment to pause and show you the next slide where we went through the Jamboards and got a sense of the themes. And then I've got another space for taking more notes, so we'll also not be so crowded.
Okay, here we go, Rachel.
All right, thanks, Ted. So I went through and I put all of the comments that were, all the sticky notes from the Jamboard into an Excel spreadsheet. And looked for like what's the big theme that they were talking about. And then what I'm still working through, and I've got through most of them, is sort of like, is that a pro comment, a con comment, like a pro parking and an anti parking, a neutral detail about parking sort of ranking. For now, because I haven't gotten finished through that part, I just have sort of a collection of what was the theme people were talking about in their notes, and then ranked them in terms of detail, in terms of the number of them. And then on the left, what you can see, this is sort of if you group the cafe grab and go option and the dining general categories, that for sure was the highest. There are 10 different notes about that. And I did include +1s. That's the other thing, is this list does include, if someone said +1, that got counted as its own number. So food-based business seems to be for sure the top list of things folks are really wanted to talk about. And then I gathered ones that were sort of what I'm calling like the no-hill route up to the station. So that was mostly about elevators, but then Diana, your group definitely, it sounds like your group is the one where there was a lot of comments about escalators. And then there was another one, there was another group that came up with the funicular, and that idea has been around in various places, and we are starting to research that because Provincetown just built a funicular in the past couple of years.
Really?
Where does it go?
Where? Yeah.
I think it may not even be open yet, but it is on the city's website, including details of the budget, which is what's really helpful. But in Provincetown, they built a funicular that goes from sort of the commercial street up to the tower, I think. I don't know Provincetown super well, but it does go up the hill. So it's something, well, we'll look at all of the options, but I think that was sort of like number 2 most popular thing everyone was excited about. And then local businesses, I think, is really the third, and really thinking about small, diverse local businesses and services. That was the other piece that came up. So then civic space, I think I've categorized it. If you loop all the things around civic space and programming and events and activity, that definitely stood out as well. YMCA, there were a lot of people commenting about the YMCA, but then there were also additional comments about childcare, indoor meeting space for community groups, adult daycare, and gyms. So if you group all those kinds of services that the YMCA generally includes in their program, that was also sort of a standout highlight. And then the last 3 I wanted to sort of call your attention to, that I think are potentially really interesting, is there were several groups that talked about music. And James, I know your group talked about music because there were specific comments that referred to you. But there were it wasn't just your group, there were definitely other groups as well that brought up the idea of a performance space. There was the idea of an outdoor piano, a band shell, a place for bands to practice. So music, there seemed to be a theme around music bubbling that I thought was really interesting. Active evenings was another thing that came up a lot. And I think where that seems to have fallen, there was one group that went through a really in-depth conversation around a little bit more activity, but still maintaining quiet. So sort of that finding that balance between a little bit more activity, having potentially a local pub kind of space, but at the same time not becoming a party center. And then the last one I thought was really interesting is there were a number of comments like the funicular that fit into this kind of, and I put the winter garden into this also, where it's sort of thinking outside the box and encouraging any development team to work with to bring a creative solution to this site, architecturally, through some sort of interesting, the transportation options, but really bringing creativity to the design. I wanted to sort of share this result so that folks could absorb. And we've got more people who haven't had a chance to speak yet, so I was going to go to them next. And I know, Michelle, it says your webcam's not working, but I think we can hear you. So do you want to try speaking?
Sure, I think I'm unmuted. So I was in Ben's group, so I do want to echo a lot of things that he had said. We did seem to spend a lot of time in talking about different kinds of businesses. Couple of things that stood out to me were the thoughts about making sure that there was access from Medford Street to the T. That was a big issue. As well as that making sure that whatever ideas we came up with for community space respected the fact that it's still a neighborhood community, and that there are, children and school, and that we need to just make sure that, it's not, business doesn't become too loud at night, but maybe we could have different rules for the weekends.
Can I ask, why are we even talking about getting to the entrance of the new T when it's been built? They decided, the Grand Poobah who made all these decisions, that that's where the entrance is. And now we're going to try to figure out how to get to the entrance? That to me almost like didn't make sense. We should have thought of all that before, we built it. Now they've got this elevator, which is going to require maintenance, which I guess that's T. But reality is, and the other thing I'm wondering is this access from Richdale to this new proposed development area. And I'm like, well, they can walk across the street, down Spruce Street, down a little bit, and then go to, they don't have to cross the mobile station to get to whatever. I mean, a city's a walker. You got to walk around. I mean, I just found out that I had no access to the T across from Medford Street. I actually thought that all along that was going to be some kind of access, because people were talking about, can you drop people off here and this and that. So now the drop off is going to be up School Street, so they're going to see a lot of increased traffic. But that again, that's part of the craziness that came along with, when you develop something like this. But again, I don't know why they built the entrance, and now we know where it is, and people are going to have to walk to it. Are we going to be able to, have rickshaws taking them up there? It just doesn't make sense to me. They built it where it is.
So James, I can fill you in, but then I do want to make sure we're sort of giving the mic to those who haven't had a chance yet. With the T, this is a big piece of it. The T station was value engineered. They said the plan was that there was going to be a really nice station right at Medford and Pearl with a drop-off zone where people could drop somebody off who needed, accessibility right to the door, pick up somebody in a cab or an Uber or family member. All of that would have been possible. When they redid the budget on the project, all of that got stripped away and they went with the cheaper solution. So the goal for one of the goals that we've been hearing is the idea that it is worth it to fill in that gap that the MBTA left us with. But you're right, there are lots of details there. I want to make sure we're catching everyone else. So Jack or Brittany, we haven't heard from either of you yet. I want to just touch base and see what you've been hearing, thoughts.
On the 14th, I was out of the country, so I wasn't, I think I told you. And I planned that over a year ago, so I couldn't change it.
Forgot about that. Yes, how was the vacation?
Very good, very good.
Okay.
Just absorbing what everybody else has to say.
And I had to leave the meeting at 7, so unfortunately I missed the actual group portion. So I learned a lot, and this has been a helpful conversation to kind of get caught up on what folks said, but I don't have anything additional to add.
Okay. Is there anyone else we haven't heard from yet this evening? Just want to make sure we're catching everyone. Casey, I don't think we've heard from you yet. In case there's anything you want to add.
Hi, I'm here. I had to join late. I think I emailed you, so I'm still kind of absorbing, but I will pipe up if I have anything to add.
Okay, thanks. So now I'll open up to everybody. I think that's everyone that we've heard from everyone individually. Lisa, were you able to make it that night?
No, that was not a Thursday night, as I recall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I teach yoga at night, so sorry I was teaching. I know that night.
That's okay. Great. So other
Rachel?
thoughts before we move on to the next question? Are there other thoughts?
I just have one thing, Rachel. It's Casey again. I don't know if my video. Oh, I think I just got my video on. I don't know if this was mentioned before I joined, but with the housing piece, one thing that came up in my group was like specifically around affordable housing. I don't know if that was mentioned in this conversation, but just making sure we're keeping things affordable for residents, especially as the T stations are opening up.
One little thing that came up was food businesses. That someone said it was a food desert, but then someone else said that the produce is not that far away. So there was some talk of grocery stores.
Anything else to capture here? Okay. Ted, do you mind jumping us to the next slide? We can always come back and add to this before we round up for the evening.
Is this what you want?
Perfect, yes. So the next question we sort of had for everyone here is sort of reflecting on if you were there, and then also for those who weren't there, if you're sort of, as you've been absorbing what we've been saying, are there perspectives that you didn't hear in these conversations that you feel like we definitely need to catch? And I see Jennifer raising her hand.
Non-English language speakers. There was nobody, and I was really hoping there'd be somebody. Thank you. Non-native English speakers.
Yeah, we had the two interpreters, but I don't think they were speaking to anyone.
Nope. Yeah, they said there was nobody in the breakout groups from those populations.
The Globe this Sunday had a good article on Union Square, the Union Square station, and they were actually reached out to some immigrant renters, and so they were able to reach people somehow.
We've had mixed success. The 90 Washington Street last meeting, Ted's very involved in that project. They had 40% of the attendees were in either the Spanish room or the Portuguese room.
Correct.
So mixed success.
Yes.
Is there a difference in the strategy utilized to get folks to that meeting versus this meeting?
Rachel, do you want me to answer that?
Sure, yeah. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what Adriana is working on with WhatsApp?
Sure. 90 Washington Street project is being run by our Economic Development Department and also the Infrastructure and Asset Management Department. And as part of that, we quickly identified the need to reach out to the substantial numbers of Spanish speakers and Portuguese speakers that live right next to the site in the Cobble Hill apartments, as well as in the surrounding neighborhoods. There's a number of other languages that are spoken in the immediate area, namely Mandarin and Nepalese, and there's a few scattered Haitian Creole speakers as well. So to that end, we've conducted outreach to non-English speakers directly. We've used our contacts in the community with the residents of the Cobble Hill apartments and the wider area with the the Hispanic speaking groups, as well as the Portuguese speaking groups. We've met with groups of people directly within the neighborhood. We've translated all of our meeting materials and most of our background materials into various languages. Our promotional materials are translated into the 5 separate languages that I mentioned. We do outreach at other town events. So it's kind of a coordinated effort to, reach out to the 40% of the folks who have attended our meetings in the past on the project that don't speak English. And because of that, we're able to get that robust turnout amongst the non-English speakers. So it's really a feedback loop that supports each other.
Yeah, and I should highlight also that that was meeting number 2.
Correct.
So we have an opportunity right now, and that's sort of one of the question after this one. So the first question we've got right up on the screen right now is sort of who wasn't there? And then the question that comes next is how do we get to them? And the idea being that if we can get to, by the time we're at sort of large group meeting number 2, hopefully we are also bringing that diversity to the meeting. Or reaching folks in other ways that, if not everyone will be meeting attendees. That just is the nature of the world. And so making sure we're also connecting with folks who just don't do meetings.
The other group that was missing was younger people, especially high school students. And although some people did speak up for them and said that we needed spaces for them to hang out, but I don't think there were many young people attending.
I was going to take that to another extent of there was nobody from the library there that I saw. So maybe an actual representative from the high school and from the library who could then be a conduit to getting more of those voices. Because I know Kathy at the library director would be thrilled to have somebody representing them. Or at least I would guess she would. I can't speak for her. I don't know her that well.
And Michelle, do you want to jump in with your thought on high school too?
Okay, here I am. So I actually have a daughter at the high school. She's a sophomore, and I happen to be speaking with the assistant vice principal with a random question. And I had talked to her about somehow maybe doing an outreach regarding what we're doing and getting some of the students involved. And she said that if we wanted to put something together, either about the spot on the board, or just in general about meetings, about them attending community meetings, that if we get it to them by the Tuesday, it can go in the following X block, which is like an open, it's an open classroom where there's like just announcements, high school announcements, and that she'll announce it to the students. And if we could just tell them a little bit of what we expect from them, and what it is that we're hoping to accomplish, that she thinks that we would get, some good feedback.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I realized you emailed me and I haven't had a chance to get back to you. I'm in a hotel in Oklahoma.
Okay, but no worries. No worries.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so high school, library, non-English speakers, others.
This is more of a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. More of a question, but I know we have some business owners in our group here. I don't know if there were many business owners on the call. In my group, I feel like I remember it being mostly residents, but I don't know the answer to
that. Yeah, I'll second. I feel like there probably wasn't a ton of business owner or worker representation. And I was thinking about how like I, as like a area employee, I only found out about even this meeting just from also being a resident and being on city emails. But if I didn't live in the area, but I only worked in the area, I'm not sure how I would know about anything. So maybe other avenues for outreach to workforce.
So that's great. I also am realizing that, as Lisa was pointing out, she was teaching, and that the evening time might not be best for businesses. I know, Lisa or Jamie, do you have a sense of, and James too, I think James's camera's off, but James, if you're still listening, if the three of you have any thoughts, like, are lunch times good, breakfast times?
Yeah, I guess yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I guess if people are coming to the area or active in the area, probably, yeah, I don't know. I'm hesitant to say, like, yeah, evenings might be hard, even though you're then maybe not working if you're in a 9 to 5, but maybe if it's, yeah, kind of tagged right on to the normal work day, perhaps. Maybe lunchtime is good. I don't know.
Lisa, I realized, yeah, let's see what you, any thoughts?
I agree. I think lunchtime would be a great option for people who are working. I mean, I know on my block, all of us that are commercial working there, you know, some of them are plumbers, some are hairdressers that are at work at night. So I do think that an option at noon, because everybody on that block pretty much works late, and I'm there late, so I see them. So a noon option, I think, might work out for people.
Awesome. As you all have been typing, I'm typing all this into the next slide too.
That could potentially be like dual purpose too, because I'm just thinking, like, if I'm not a parent, but I'm thinking parents can jump in, but like if I have kids that are young, maybe I don't want to be hopping on a call when my young kids are like home right before I put them to bed, but maybe during my lunch hour I could hop on.
Yeah. Right. Rachel, do you want me to go to slide 10?
Yeah, so I've been adding in, sort of as we've been talking, sort of the sort of targeted groups and the sort of what we've been talking about. I just want to see, I see a hand raised. I think, Lisa, do you have something else to add?
I was just going to ask a question, and I apologize because I wasn't at the last meeting, but did it come up at all about solar panels on the building or any kind of like charging stations and stuff like that? Because I haven't heard any of that discussed, so I was just curious.
There was some, in very general, in the notes that I saw, there were general notes about sustainability. I think there was much more conversation about the flood and stormwater side of sustainability, but there were other folks who said, like, the meeting a sort of high standard for insulation and everything, like a LEED platinum or a net zero design. But solar specifically, I don't know if anyone said.
Okay, great. I was just curious. Also, I do second that. Being a parent myself, my son has a ton of activities after school. I think noon is great for working parents as well.
Okay. So yeah, so I mean, that's a relatively light lift. If we were to redo do this as a sort of second version of this presentation and workshop format, we could do a noon time pretty quickly and advertise that out.
Someone mentioned the X block for the high school. What time is that? What is there? It's a particular time of the week, like 1 hour a week or something like that, or 1 hour a day?
Michelle, do you have more info?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
All right, sorry about that. So the X block is, I believe, from 10:20 to 11:10 every Tuesday.
That's,
And that's when they make announcements?
Yeah, that's when they make announcements, and that's when, yeah, all the kids have a free period.
I see.
so maybe could we have a meeting just to get the students involved during that period?
Yeah, there's another, so one option I think we can do, there's two things I was thinking, sort of listening to everyone's ideas about the high school. One is that we can very easily get the digital survey to them through that announcement. It can be pulled up on the phone. It's very quick and easy. It's the same questions that we asked at the workshop format. And then the other thing is there is a student group that's sort of engaging with design and urban development topics. And so one idea is also to sort of go to them and say, hey, do you guys want to host a workshop? That group has been very engaged with the Union Square project, so I don't know if it's like too much for them to take on being involved with the Union Square Plaza project and potentially this one, but I could see them being excited about both. So we can definitely take it to them and see if there's a way forward to sort of see if that group would host us.
I think it would be great to have, beyond just sending the high school students the survey. I forget how much introductory material was in the survey, but if they can hear a presentation or watch a recorded presentation or something first that explains, some of the stuff from the last meeting I didn't know before, when you were talking about the history of the site and why was the Homans building torn down and all those types of things. I think it would help the students a lot to hear that background before they answer the questions about the site. So it could be combined with a short presentation.
Yeah, we do a video recording. I wonder if there's a way to do a snippet and a version.
Yeah.
Lisa, jump in. I see you have a hand raised.
I think that's from before.
Oh, okay.
I think that's from before. Do I put it off? I'm sorry. I've never used GoToMeeting before. So.
That's okay. It's very weird.
Down.
Yeah, you have to click it down. No worries.
Oh, okay.
So as everyone's sort of mulling this, Ted, do you mind jumping to the next slide and I can sort of show you what sort of like timeline we've been thinking about a little bit? So we're at meeting 2, just sort of just above this green box in sort of our engagement calendar. What I've been thinking about this is sort of that we have, with the structure of you all meeting together as a group, as a sort of framework for the engagement that we're doing. I was thinking it might be nice if we could wrap up our survey virtually before your May meeting. So that way, as a group, we can all sort of digest it just like we're doing now with the meeting that just happened. That gives us a good amount of time to do more outreach in the community and get these questions answered in physical forms, in digital notes and stickies on maps or whatever it might be, to bring more folks in. So there's the next thing that we know is going to happen is that there's that big stormwater meeting. There's a series of 3 stormwater meetings that are happening to talk about the stormwater master plan. The area, because Gilman Square sits on one side of the hill. That side of the hill, the meeting about the Gilman Square side of the hill is March 30th. So that is next week. If you're on Highland or from on your Oxford side of the hill, that meeting is later this week, I believe. But for the question about the tank, that's where they're really going to start to dig into sort of what the overall approach is to the watershed and all the water that would end up in the tank. So I think there's an opportunity at that meeting to really get into some of these bigger questions around what's happening with the stormwater system, but also an opportunity to guide people to take the survey if they want to talk about this. Then there's other activities, and I hadn't populated this with the things we've been talking about just now, but I did populate this with the things we talked about last time. So last time, I think, Jennifer, you mentioned that there is open studios coming up. And so one option is that we could do some tabling at open studios. And then another opportunity might be to actually use the meeting in April to do some level of other ways of getting in touch with folks. So whether that's some virtual activities or doing some tabling sort of at the bus stops and right outside the site, or sitting on, there's all those nice benches. There is that little bench area across from Sarma at the Triangle site. So maybe that's an opportunity to sort of set ourselves up there in a commuting hours time. So rather than doing a virtual meeting, maybe that's an opportunity to do more direct engagement. So I wanted to float those ideas, but also sort of see if we can definitely slide in all those other things we were just talking about into this time period.
Well, those bench areas, this is Jennifer, that bench area, another group that would get to is the residents of that one apartment building right there. Because I work in Mad Oyster, and they use that as a place to take a smoke break or to sit and chat or what have you. So there's nearly, on any nice day, there's almost always a resident from that building there somewhere. So that might be another way to engage that community as well, just because they're there. And as far as the tabling during open studios, I can talk to our building manager and see if our parking lot might be available, or a piece of the parking lot might be available for a table. I can't staff it because I'll be, in my studio. But that's a possibility, because we've been talking about what we might be doing in the parking lot during open studios anyway. So if we wanted to use that, I can certainly approach Jane and see what she thinks.
I think, Jennifer, that would be fantastic. If you guys are planning an event or looking for folks to be at an event right there, we can have staff be there, as well as if folks from this group are open to it and interested. It would be great to have some volunteers. Not necessarily all of us, that would be a lot. But maybe like 2 or 3 folks out in person at some of these activities.
Would this be an all day? Would it be all day, or would it be?
Open studios is noon to 6.
I could help with part of the time for at Mad Oyster for staffing a table.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana.
I'll go ahead and
too, but on the weekend.
Sorry.
Sorry. I was just saying I can too, just on the weekend.
Awesome. So what I'm tempted to do is sort of put together a more detailed schedule and send it to you all by email, sort of putting all this on a calendar. I'm realizing one idea that is not on this list or the list we were just talking through is I have reached out to the Pearl Street Park management team about doing a presentation with their residents in person. So we are working towards a date. We haven't landed on something yet, but the goal is to host an event specifically for residents there. And then if we can also, we're going to try and do something also with the staff. But also if we're doing a noon meeting, generally, I think for anyone who prefers noon, that might be an easy way to get to them as well.
All right, do you want me to go to the next slide, Rachel?
Yeah, that'd be great. I just want to make sure we're done today by 7 on the dot, if we can. So the last thing I wanted to get everyone sort of percolating on a little bit is what staff will be doing in the background. So we are planning to be doing a lot of research while we're doing all this engagement and getting more input. We are also starting to dig into these bigger questions. So on our list already are to do a study on grocery market viability, looking at there's a few different models of grocery store that we're going to try and figure out. So what are the options? What would it take for a grocer to come to a medium scale, small medium scale grocer to come to either Gilman Square or to Winter Hill, because the same questions are being had at the top of the hill at 299 Broadway. And so we understand that the area that is served is there's an overlap there. So we're trying to understand, between the two sites, what do grocers like out of either? And can we attract somebody? We're also looking at the YMCA. We're starting conversations with them to really dig into the details of what they need. And so we're trying to understand it, because I think this one, as we were I think as James was raising, there's a question, right? Is the mobile site a need to have, or is it a want to have? And the YMCA is one of those ones where we have a stronger question of, is that a need to have? Because we know that their footprint, how much space they need to fit the pool and the basketball court and everything is pretty big. So definitely came up in the conversation that, in reading the jam boards, it was very clear that there's an interest in understanding the stormwater infrastructure better. So we'll be going to the stormwater meeting on the 30th. And we are coordinating on a more day-to-day basis with our engineering colleagues to dig into these questions so we can bring you better answers. And then the last one that we had on our list was to really dive into this elevator, escalator, funicular set of questions, and what are the options, what would make them work, what are the costs to making some of these projects happen. And then in our discussion this evening, I've added two things that folks here brought up, being that the broader understanding of the mobile options and the legal details, and then the remediation question. So I wanted to leave this list with you, and if there's anyone who has anything that you think should be on this list that we haven't added already, we can add it tonight. But also, this is something we understand you might need to mull on as well.
Rachel, I had one that occurred to me, that when the presentation was being done on the 14th, when we were talking about the height of the buildings, shade and so not even just how large the building is relative to the hill, because they're right, in scale to the high school on top of the hill, you could put a 15-story building in there and it wouldn't look out of place. But the relevant piece to Gilman Square is how it is from the ground. And so what kind of an impact would a taller building have on sun access? Because that's the direction the sun comes in. So if there were a 10-story building, there's a whole swath of that part of the neighborhood that would have a lot of shade on it. And how that would, solar access, people's solar panels that they've installed, what would the impact be if they weren't getting that direct sunlight? Because I know there's a bunch of houses that have solar panels down in that area. But also the ground feel. How does it feel to be on the street in that area if you have this very tall building next to you? I've lived everywhere from the Fenway area to the suburbs of New York where I grew up. So I've felt a lot of different areas as a resident, and having a super tall building there does not excite me as a resident and a pedestrian. So I just want to make sure that gets thoroughly researched, so that whatever the upper limit is for number of floors is based not just relative to the top of the hill, but also to how it feels to live on the bottom of that.
That's a great point. Diana, yeah.
Yeah, this is probably getting ahead of the next steps, but at what point do the staff imagine they will have HR&A, the advisors, or your consultants or others, like start looking at what kind of revenue would a developer get by building X number of housing, and how much would that be able to subsidize a YMCA or a park or a escalator or things like that? That's probably down the line after you have a better sense of how much space everything needs?
That is happening actually already. So they're diving into those questions, and they're building a financial model to test all of these things. The additional research that we need to do are kind of on this list already, which is, what are the space needs of a YMCA, and what are the costs of the elevator escalator setup. So once we have that, they're sort of getting to the place where we'll be able to plug that in, and they'll be able to really give us a good understanding of if they're viable.
Yeah, okay.
Melinda.
Yeah, just to Jennifer's point about a super tall building, I remember in the presentation you had the gentleman speak who was from, they'd spoken to a bunch of developers, I guess, right? And said that even amongst the developers, it seemed like a super tall building wasn't something that any of them would be interested in. I think that's what I heard. And in my mind, I said, oh, phew, I don't have to worry about a super tall building going in there. So I don't know if I was right to feel that sense of relief, or if it's still an option to have over 12 stories or something.
So what they've heard is that from the developer, you're right, that you did catch that correctly, that they did hear from the developers so far that about 6 stories is where they think the market is. The question is there a reason to push the market in any particular, in a higher direction for a particular reason? And those reasons might be, do we need to go higher to get the amount of affordable housing we want? Do we need to go higher to have the return on the elevator? And that's what our HR&A is going to be diving into deeper, is would we need to push it a little bit? It changes how they would do construction, so the numbers might not pencil, right? Just working with private money. There may be a scenario where we have to understand an amount of city dollars contributing to making some of this infrastructure work. And that's what they're going to help us understand is it some, our infrastructure requests out of the site things that can be handled or subsidized by private money, or do we need to sort of look at a more complex picture? We've also been starting to look at on this sort of these ideas around uniqueness and the unique nature of the site. Are there unique architectural solutions that are not a tower, but are a little bit taller? So there's some really unique examples of buildings that sort of mimic a hill, right? And that might answer that solar access question. And so we're trying to see, that's one of the questions we've been asking them also to start exploring in their conversations with the development community is, are there models that are not standard development pieces that would allow us to, work with, if we need the escalator to go up, what height do we need the escalator to go? And then can we build to that point, sort of waterfall it back? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Thank you. That's good explanation. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? We can go back to any other pieces. I wanted to make sure catch or anything else. I'm looking now just to double check, and we will do I'm looking at, I don't see any public comment, public members, but I want to make sure we're sort of keeping an eye on that and leave a space for it.
Can I jump in for a minute?
Please.
So I just wanted to get back to Ben's point, because that's something that really resonated with me from the first meeting, and something that we talked about at the last meeting regarding what the plan is for Medford Street. I think that we also need to make sure that that stays in our minds, while we think about designing the future, we need to know what is going to be right next to us in order to get the bigger picture of what what this is all going to look like. And also, just one other quick point. After the survey, I know at some point we had talked about doing like a physical, maybe like a walking tour of the area. And I was thinking, I just wanted to bring that up again and say maybe after the survey, that would be something that we could do together once we have an idea of what it is that everyone's hoping can happen.
Yeah, so actually, Ted, do you mind jumping back one slide?
Sure.
So I was thinking about this a little bit as we were putting this together, and where I was leaning on all this is one option would be that we use the Thursday in April, could be a walking meeting. It could be tabling, it could be more of a direct outreach sort of event, or it could be a walking meeting. Because of this change where we are now officially subject to the open meeting law, that means if we're doing a walking meeting, we would open it up to the public as well to join. But we could do that as a sort of a walking workshop in April. That's one option, and that could be an opportunity to do engagement. Or we could sort of do that as a separate standalone piece in either our June meeting or our July meeting. Alongside that, what I was sort of thinking to go with this sort of after the survey time is that might be good timing as well to take one of the Thursday meetings and do that presentation that folks have been asking for, where we talk about everything that's happening in Gilman Square all together. So we would bring to that meeting the engineering team that's working on the stormwater pieces. We would bring to that meeting the folks who are working on the art piece and the MBTA's box. We would bring to that meeting also our open space team that's starting to think about the Medford Street Bridge. And then the team that's working on the Medford Pearl design as well. So I'm wondering, maybe Michelle, if you think June or July is too late for a walking group altogether, and we should do April, or if you think April, the other way would be better.
My only thought was that I would think that it would be better to do it after the survey was completed, so that we could get a general sense from hopefully a larger subset of the community as to what it is that people are looking for, and so that we could go into this walking tour with those ideas in mind.
Okay. So then what I'm leaning towards is that we look at actually pushing out that like big picture. What I'm thinking is maybe that May is our survey results debrief altogether. Then we do June walking tour, and then we do July with all the other teams. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see.
I wonder whether, do you find that in the summertime it's harder to get people to come to the meetings though, and walk, especially a walking tour where you can't just join, over Zoom from wherever you happen to be? I wonder whether the walking tour should be in May because there are more people here. I don't know. I mean, I have a kid, so everybody just disappears in the summer, and you can't see anybody because everyone's taking off at different times. Parents, families.
How late does the school year run this year? Does anyone know? Is June 23rd still school time?
No, the kids will be out by then. I think their last day is June 17th.
Okay. So that week actually will be hard potentially. The 23rd might be a hard one for folks to join a walking event if we're, because a lot of people go on vacation right after the school ends.
Right.
Absolutely.
All right. Let me do a little rethinking. One option might also be that we do May in person and that we send you the results a couple of days ahead of time to take a look at, and we'll publish them. If we're sending them to you all, it is published publicly. So we could publish the results sort of publicly. Here's just as that chart was, here's where we are. We could then walk in May, and then in June talk about it. That might be a solution. So meeting 5 would be in June, and then July, assuming we have all the staff that we need, would be the all projects coordination.
By then,
And I
those
think-
projects are farther along too, right? So there'd be more information.
Yeah, and I think maybe, was it Ram or Jack was saying also the train? Maybe we might actually be at the train at that point. They've only said summer. We don't know dates.
The summer does seem like a better time to be outside if you're doing the walking tour.
Okay. So I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. Is there anything else unrelated to any of this as well that anyone would like to bring up before we move to a check-in again on public comment and wrap up? Okay, I'll note, if you haven't been checking the chat, Jennifer added some helpful links around the P-Town funicular, and did I miss another one? And then Councillor Klingon also added just a note of thanks to everyone here participation. Okay. So just a last check of public comment for our second public comment period. And I am not seeing anyone at this time. So seeing no more public comment, the last thing on our agenda is to adjourn. So unless there's any final thoughts? All right. I will say thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I think there's just so much material here. It's been just great to hear all of your feedback. And I think this engagement plan is looking really good. And I will make sure I get it out to everyone with specific dates and times and volunteer slots, so that folks can join up. And with all these activities, we'll make sure that there's staff joining you as well, so you're not on your own.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
And we'll see you all in a month.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
And more between
Thank
them.
Yes.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Rachel, do you want to stay on real quick?
Sure. Let me just double check, but we are stopping